Does it work in Minecraft 1.1.1.2 Bedrock? Good question. Hi guys and welcome, Knemon here. Minecraft is a really gorgeous looking game with beautiful vistas, breathtaking terrain generation, but sometimes we need resources to survive and thrive, and for that we need farms. I've been running the Fun Farm series for a while, since late Minecraft 1.8 at times, but recently, even more than ever, I kept getting roughly the same comments on and on again. Does it work in an insert a new particular Minecraft version? Since my goals in general are to come up with the designs that have a purpose to last, I thought that it might be a good time to run through all of them and see will they break. I know, it takes ridiculous amount of time to just click on the download button for a particular design and just run it with your game and then leave a comment like it does work or it doesn't work. I get it, so it's easier just to leave a question, but hey, today we'll combat our inner zoomer and put them all to the test. In general, it should be all okay. In some rare cases, there will be one or two things that needs tweaking, but the design will still be fine. And sometimes the mechanics change so much the whole concept is just fun. So I thought what I'll do today is just to run through all the fun farms, not some of them, all of them, and see which one of them work, which don't. And if you were scared before while fiddling with some previous designs in order to fix them, you may also learn a thing or two how to fix a design that doesn't seem to work anymore. Not sure how many of the Fun Farms designs we'll be able to go through today, but at least we'll give them a shot. So our first farm was actually farm number 0, it was kind of like a pilot episode. We showed this Wither Skeleton farm. Funnily, when I was loading the world already showed version is unknown, which is pretty scary. But this seems like the structure generated okay, the Nether Fortress. As you can see, I just didn't even care to put any perimeter around it. That's the first no-go. So it happened, the farm was just so scary, laggy, I just thought I'll just leave it as it is, so at least it doesn't scare off people just by creating a massive amount of lag. And this concept of a farm is overly stupid in general. Too much redstone, you only get wither skeletons, they are killing off the most important thing you have in the wither skeleton farm, which are blazes really, because who needs stacks and stacks and stacks of wither skeleton skulls? But in general this farm actually works. It actually works better than before, because now with the new rules for spawning for the magma cubes, they actually won't be spawning here anymore, even the small ones. So the farm was very easy, you just wander around these areas, and if you're on one side of the farm it loads the other part in terms of allowing mobs to spawn. And you can just kill off the remaining wither skeletons that will be sticking out too much of the blocks over here. So that was essentially a response to a dying shifting floor concept, where they prevented mobs from falling through floors that were moving back and forth. It's not a fancy farm in terms of the design, it's not clever farm, it's just way too much redstone, way too much blocks. But at least it works. I'll just give it a pass. Episode 1 was actually this monstrosity, and this is actually a farm that I'm quite proud of. First of all, the water streams upgraded immediately when I upgrade the world, which is a bummer actually, so I fixed those. And the whole farm was actually pretty much a showcase of me trying to figure out how end gateways generate and how we can force them to generate in the void. And that's essentially what you can see over here. So we have a very quick communication between the main island and then the end gateway in the middle of the void. So the premise is actually quite simple in the sense that we have our endermen spawning over here on these pads, and then we have snow golems hitting them with snowballs and scaring them off into those platforms with fence gates. And we went through all the lengths to compute what are the chances of them actually landing on those fence gates and actually maximizing that. And then they'll be falling down on those pads over here, taking damage, bringing them to one hit kill. And then they'll be scared off again, and the only place they really have to go is this pad in the middle, the small pad with their players. A very cool concept. It's actually right now with sweeping edge, because this was before sweeping edge. You had to punch every one of them separately. It's actually blazing fast. If you put several players here in the middle, they can barely actually kill them on time. So this is actually very, very fast concept, and it's not even in the bottom of the world, which we know it's actually should work much better. One thing I actually needed to fix is because of the end gateway teleportation mechanics. The idea was when you use the end gateway just from the end platform, you'll be teleported right into that diamond block facing exactly the farm that you have to go. So you don't have to actually even move to start using it, which is pretty cool. And the game will put you inside this end rod, which is also a little crazy. Those rules didn't change, but what did change is now if you have, for example, glass blocks around, it will actually put you on those glass blocks as well. So I had to remove these and replace them with something that doesn't have a top solid surface, which in this case I just put some trapdoors. So just a little change, just because of the end gateway, but the whole mechanic with Enderman works pretty well to this day. It's definitely a pass. Now, in our second episode, we dealt with witch farms and just essentially trying to come up with solutions to do after the concept of shifting floors was dead. The funny thing is, in this case, when I loaded this world, the witch farm wasn't here. The structure that was here before in 1.18 disappeared. Thankfully, it turns out I actually have the tools to rectify the situation. In this case I'm using the Carpet mod, so I can just turn on the new program that I built with Scarpet, which is the overlays, and you can turn it on for witch huts. And there's nothing here, but it's actually a way to fix it, which just we can use set structure, and we just have to be in that particular chunk that we want to set a structure and set it to the witch hut, which means that it will actually generate the structure for us. Isn't that cool? It doesn't actually put all the blocks, it just makes a structure. So actually now if we check, now we have witches to spawning. So general goal of this episode was to reduce the reduction of spawning spaces by using different methods like flushing them with water or whatnot. And it turns out that the swiper was kind of the best idea. In this case, the swiper, this is pre-flying flame machines. I borrowed that swiper from some wither skeleton farm that I found. I can't remember exactly who came up with it, but it actually works pretty well to this day, this kind of swiper without flying machine, and it's just fine. You can always replace it with modern flying machines with observers with exactly the same effect, and the farm works pretty great. I'll give it a pass. Now in episode 3 we got another witch farm, which in this case was skeleton powered witch farm. It was a really cool concept, and this actually still is a really cool concept, and even for some time was actually the most powerful technically way to farm witches, because at some point mobs could start spawning in other mobs. In this case we are not removing any spawning spaces, so this witch farm design would actually be 100% efficient, which is pretty cool. It's not now, but it's still really good. I mean, this was the first iteration. I didn't use ice for the spawning floors, so they take 1 or 2 hits to get shot down. Sometimes they retaliate against the skeletons, but they use harming potions and poison, which on undead mobs acts like regeneration and healing potions, so it's actually a really safe way of dealing with witches. There's one thing that is a little bit broken with this concept. If you go down, we had a way of dealing with the extra arrows by essentially dropping them on falling sand blocks. This trick doesn't work anymore, cannot really keep them this way, but actually I'm not worried about it, because if we can see, this farm, because we have a bunch of arrows that come from skeletons, acts also like a very safe record farm. It's because the creepers that can spawn in this area are so far away from the original skeletons that they will never ever blow up. So this concept is actually something that I may came back at some point too, because we know that witch farms, either single or even double, are significantly below the mob cap, meaning that we can actually squeeze extra additional farms around it without affecting the rates. In this case we can get extra gunpowder and extra records just for the cost of essentially nothing. So you might be concerned that, yeah, but the concept maybe still works, but you have this extra amounts of arrows, hundreds of arrows over here. Aren't they generating tons of lag? And the answer is not that really. I mean, we can take entities over here, and as you can see, even despite having a couple hundred arrows, the arrows themselves are not that bad for the lag in terms of like they cost, and they despawn within a minute. So that's actually not a big deal if you think about it. If you are super concerned about the performance, yeah, that's probably not the best design, but it wasn't the best design ever anyways because of the entities it's using. In terms of the performance and the fun aspect of it, it still works. I'll give it a strong pass. The next farm is our passive mob farm, the giant one. The first one I tried the water flushing concept with running the redstone through the middle of the farm and just spread it outside. Honestly, before I published that, I actually searched quite a bit trying to find out anybody who's doing the same thing, the same kind of way. I couldn't find it, and I kind of like the design, and it's actually showed up a couple of times on the channel with other types of farms as well, as a very simple and cheap way of building a farm with very low resources needed. In this case, yeah, you can argue that the amount of dirt you need is ridiculous, and I agree. And this was also my last farm that I built without even looking at the mechanics in terms of like the spawning mechanics and all this in-game quirks, without doing any proper research. As you can see, the farm obviously works. Should I recommend it? Definitely not. There are better concepts. We'll be going to that damn soon. But actually the farm works. There's nothing wrong about it. So I guess we'll give it a pass. Now, in the next episode, we looked into the passive mob farms again, because I started actually reading the code and trying to figure out what's going on there, and basically realized that by building the farm way below in the first subchunk, so up to Y14, you are getting much better rates. So in this case, the farm was operating in two modes, which was the horse mode, so you could actually save all the animals, and also regular mode, the meat mode. The farm's actually working much better in the portal form, because now we don't have any lag when mobs goes through the portals, especially if you have very few portals on the other end, which is really swell. However, this is not the optimal design these days. Now the spawning doesn't really rely on actual subchunk count, so the lower you go, the better. So in this case, it's quite a bit laggy because of the water streams that we have over here. We can actually reduce the lag quite a bit, reducing the spawns a little bit, making sure that it's actually producing still quite a lot of items. So here is kind of a modernized version of this farm. I did a couple of changes. First of all, I have removed extra floors. So we are just using one floor at the bottom. We're just flashing them. So we are getting about, I don't know, like 60% or 50% of what we were getting before, but at a quarter of the lag that we were causing with our water flashing, which is pretty good. And I would honestly recommend this same kind of approach. If you want to build a bigger farm, just find a bigger island, blow up all the area, and just build it lower with more of those pods. I also really like the idea here of routing the water streams inside the bedrock layers. Because of how the farms are designed, if you don't want to elevate items, you have to go through the bedrock, which is actually a pretty cool task to do. However, the problem here was with hoppers and the hopper hitboxes. Hoppers used to have a full hitbox, so anywhere a water stream was going next to the hoppers would actually now getting the items stuck in them. So I had to reroute a few water streams, but nothing too serious. I also made the portals smaller. There's no need to have those giant portals that we had here in the beginning, and optionally mobs can either end up being cooked or being transported to the nether. Now, a little change that happened is now when mobs are on fire, they will actually run away from the fire, which means that it is technically possible that a few animals will survive after each spawning cycle, but in this case I'll never see more than one or two, which means that it doesn't affect spawning whatsoever. They'll be cooked in the next 20 seconds, so no problem with that. So the farm works really great. I'll just give it a pass. We just slightly improved it because of the new spawning rules, and that's pretty much it. So in episode 6 was our first Guardian farm episode. Lots of people were saying you have to remove the monument to even build a Guardian farm. I thought, what if you can keep the building, okay? You still have to drain water. What if you can keep the building and build a farm around it? There's not that much space you can use, but at least you can try. But before we do that, we have to run an important test. At some point in the game, and that wasn't when these farms were designed, it was actually way after, there was a change in the game where different blocks reacted differently and basically caused Guardians to fall with different speeds. And in this design, we really care about how fast they fall down. So we are here in 1.13.2, the last working version I know that had it. For some reason, Guardians were falling actually faster next to the solid blocks, and things like glass that are really good for bringing more spawns were actually slowing them down very significantly. So we figured out that we have to use either redstone blocks, observers, or TNT. There are only 3 blocks that would allow us to quickly move the Guardians down without affecting the spawn rates. However, when we switch to the most recent version, we can realize that it doesn't really matter what they fall through next to. It still is a little bit faster if they don't fall from the top source block, but in general, it doesn't actually matter right now. We can go back to our glass Guardian farms and be done with it. So that's actually pretty good stuff. You see our control over here, it seems like the block just have to have any collision, because in this case we are using open fence gates and they actually slow them down, just like they did before. So obviously nowadays it doesn't matter that much. There are other concepts, for example you can use bubble columns. I'm not so sure it's faster, but at least it's a new way to do it, and we'll probably look into that soon in the future. But this kind of design still works, and still works just fine. But that's just the spawning tank. There is a problem with the lava, clearly. They're dying in lava, and that's because they're now just swimming in it. So definitely need to look into how we can rectify the situation. Definitely less lava is desired, and that we need to test and try to come up with a solution. Although this little funky here structure of blocks was just to point out the subchunk rule, that it doesn't matter where you have these blocks, as long as they are in that subchunk that the farm is in, you are extending the spawns outside of the farm. And that's not true anymore. Now we have to do them layer by layer exactly where we want them to spawn. Let me quickly build a fix for that farm and we'll show that in action. So this is the fixed farm. We have removed one lava layer and we've extended the other one to 3 blocks deep. And this actually is pretty well. The guardians land right on the hoppers with just a few hearts spare, which is pretty cool, and we can get their drops collected, no problem. You can see the skirt of blocks that we put around the farm is actually at this particular level, and the reason is the guardians will not spawn on the top water block because it has a solid block above their heads, which is pretty fine, and that's what we want. So the top block that they will be able to spawn is the one below, and in order for a mob to spawn on that block, they need to have a block below their feet. And that's how the game determines where to finish the spawning. So in this case, we are extending that platform for spawning at this level, so our last spawning layer that's supported with this extra spawns is actually in this level. So we don't extend it unnecessarily above what we really need to, and it should work just fine in boosting our spawns. Oh, and we also had a fancy concept of a bouncy garden farm where they jump on the slime blocks, they finally jump higher and higher and land on the hoppers and inevitably die. It was a really slow concept, but I guess it still works. Now, we finished an episode with this concept of an XP farm as well. We were using potions here in this case because it was before sweeping was a thing. Potions was pretty much the only way to do it. So obviously this farm doesn't work because of the lava, because of the other aspects. So let's quickly tweak it and see how we fare. So now we are in the fixed version of the farm. It works, technically speaking. I wouldn't say it works that well comparing to did before. We just leave it like that for now. We have more guardian farms to go through later, but I'll give it a week pass, so to speak. It's not as fast as it used to be because more guardians are actually dying in lava, and that's a problem that we will probably need to fix some later time. Now in episode 7 we worked with Iskel's bovine problems. So he built a passive mob farm in his base right in the caves, and he was getting like 5 cows an hour or something like that. So I came up with this design: low in the world, 4 spawning layers, maximized for the first subchunk. In this case we needed a lot of lighting because there was a bug that mushroom cows were requiring both the grass blocks and the mycelium blocks to be present in order to spawn in little darker conditions. Otherwise you have to have the light level of 11, I think, to get them to successfully spawn, which is pretty bad. But thankfully this bug was fixed, so we actually don't need all of this. This is all unnecessary, we can just remove it. And also any block above our spawning layer, even transparent like glass or enrods, will actually decrease our chances for mobs to spawn. So we have to get rid of all of these. We have to get rid of the sea lanterns that we have with an extra floors, just replace them with mycelium for extra spawning. Remove the stuff at the top for the AFK platform. It's not really needed and it's only harming the spawn rates. And just leave it like that, and with 4 layers. It's not a big deal in terms of the lag. It only flashes when we have a spawn, and see how much we do. So this is the fixed design. It's much simpler. We have removed unnecessary lighting. Everything works seemingly just fine. If just time the experiment. Before I measured it at about 540 drops per hour. In this case it's actually much better. It's probably because of the changes in pack spawning and pack sizes and all this stuff. But hey, the farm works, and the farm works even better than before. Guess it's a pass. So in episode 8 we had our version 2 of our skeleton powered witch farm. Obviously it works the same way as it did the other version. It's a little bit more efficient because we used ice blocks for spawning layers. We used punch 2 bows. So in this case witches will be pushed with 1 arrow pretty much all the time. They glide effectively to their demise for sure. We also lowered the skeletons by half a block by just letting them sit in the minecarts. This also allows them to much better and much more effectively shoot down the witches. Obviously we have the same problem with the arrows. If you measure it, it's only 5 milliseconds really. It's not a big deal unless you're building a lot of these farms or you want to mix in other farms and contraptions as well. I won't worry about it. I'll just invest in some crazy gunpowder and record farm. This will allow us to use some of the arrows to kill other mobs, so we have less of these and also get some extra drops. Another use for those arrows may be some sort of a purple farm, because we have the new mechanics that we can actually use arrows to shut down the purple flowers. So that's also an idea that we can use. I would say it's still a pass. In episode 9, we had our blaze farms, our venture into interesting mechanics with wandering. You can see we are in this world that has a huge roof I have generated here up top, so at least we have darkness, so you can actually test the nether farms without actually being in the nether. So these farms were all designed before we had sweeping, before we could hit more than mob at a time. So we need to crush them and then we need to punch them individually one by one. Now those things, they just got way simpler. In terms of like the farm itself, it works perfectly fine. There's nothing broken about it. It used to be broken for a very short period of time, some 1.14 snapshots. Because blazes were seeing players through the blocks and were able to actually aggro and start flying, which is not what we really want. But that's already gone and it's already been fixed, so that's not a problem whatsoever. There are simpler concepts of these farms. We'll be covering them soon when the sweeping came out, but at least this one, I would say it's definitely a pass. In episode 10, we dealt with garden farms again, assuming we don't have to deal with the ocean monument, so we can just remove it. And basically trying to get as much of them spawn as possible. So came up with this design, very simple. The cool thing about it was that you could actually stop them from spawning by just engaging those pistons. And actually that was working pretty well. At some point, as I just said, this wasn't working that great because pistons were actually dragging them down, but this actually gets resolved again. We can use pistons to get them down really quickly, and that's pretty cool. One thing that's important to know that we are here flying in Spectator is if you want to properly now evaluate farms with multiple players, even if one player is AFKing as a regular player, the other players that are in Spectator, they also influence the mob cap. I don't think this is actually intended. It just happened to turn out this way. Is it a bug? Is it just a new mechanics? I don't know. Just for now, when you're testing, make sure that none of the spectators that are observing the farm are actually wandering around, because that will increase the mob caps and artificially increase the rates. A couple of things we can notice with this farm: for whatever reason, there is a slight chance that the guardians will actually fall and live, which is a little bit weird, but I guess it's fine. You can just decrease the drop by half a block and that should be okay. Also, we are not here bound to a specific height in terms of the sub-chunk. We can technically go with this farm as low as we can. We don't have that much space really to use because we are already at the bedrock layer, and my assumption is that you don't remove unnecessary bedrock unless you really have to. In this case, it won't help you that much. So you pretty much want to finish your farm above the top bedrock layer. So we still have like a 1 or 2 blocks to go. So the farm is only producing 95,000 right now drops per hour, which is really bad. But let's try to rectify the situations, extend the drop shaft by at least half a block, making sure that they all die, and see how we deal with it. So that's a fixed version of the farm. We've lowered the spawning area just by a few blocks, so at least we can kill them at the bottom. And yes, I'm using the version with tons of hoppers, and I'm not ashamed of it. I think it's not a big deal. It's kind of a scenario where you have a farm that is not in your base, okay? And the rates went up back above 120. The only problem really was that extra half a block of fall needed. It's roughly what it was before. I don't know yet where the other missing 4,000 or 5,000 went. It's possibly related with their pathing, but that would require a little more investigating. I guess it's good enough anyway, so it's a pass. Now, in this episode, we also focus on how to get the most XP from the Guardians. I actually came up with a design that is capable of providing us with 180,000, which is a limit of XP from Guardians we can take and a limit from any traditional mobs, making it the most powerful XP farm you can build. Obviously, the farm doesn't work because of the lava. We've already covered that. Let's fix it. That shouldn't be a big problem. Let's leave it at this height right now. This can be possibly lowered, maybe, I don't know. But at least we can increase the skirt of blocks. In this case, they were just to cover that sub-chunk. We have to raise them a little bit to get more spawns in the tanks and just see it, how it works. So this is the fixed farm. Does it work? Yes. Does it work good? Actually, it doesn't. So I've been testing that farm. Technically speaking, if you have 180,000 XP per hour, which is the maximum amount, you should be able to get to level 100 in 10 minutes. And our certificate over here, Steve, got actually to 83 levels. we were like 2/3 of the way there. So the farm right now operates on 120,000 XP per hour. There are a bunch of reasons why this happens, okay? One thing is, I'm actually not a fan of perimeters in the sense that you shouldn't be building something that you don't have to just for a small farm. So in this case, we drained the monument for sure, but we have kept all the oceans around us. And you can see there's a bunch of drowned here and there. Drown spawning is not that big of a deal for Guardians farms. Obviously it is detrimental, but they're not spawning like in thousands, judging by the number of spawning spaces. They have much lower chances to do so, but they are definitely a big problem in this particular case. So what can you do about it? Not much. With this kind of approach, you have to kind of deal with it and just assume that they are there. Can it be fixed? Maybe, with a different design. You can definitely try a bunch of strategies, like for example making the farm a little bit bigger, assuming that the drowned is gonna be a little bit less because of that. But that might not be the best way to do it. So the drowned is another problem, and the question is, do you really want to make a perimeter just to not have them here? It is possible and is doable, but I wouldn't recommend it. But there's another problem. Even if we remove all the drowned, which I can do by just flicking this simple command block over here, we still have the performance problems with this farm. In our testing right now, even with the drowned off, the Steve was getting about 150,000 XP per hour rather than the 180 that it should have got, giving there was 220,000 worth of XP of Guardians spawning in the top tanks, which I measured using the spawn tracking from the Scarpet mod, which tells us that about 30% of the Guardians actually were dying in lava rather than going through it. There was always a loss with Guardians going through lava blades. About 10% of them were getting caught and died prematurely, but in this case the loss is actually so big it actually influences the final rates of the farm. The farm, technically speaking, works, and works pretty well. 150,000 XP per hour is no slouch, but should be improved. So this is something that we'll leave it for later. Come up with a better strategy to maybe a different way to kill them, and maybe even use soul sand and bubble columns. I don't know. That's something that we need to experiment how to bring back the maximum XP garden farm. So with this design, I would say it's a soft pass, because the farm still works. If you have one in your world, you can still fix it by reducing the lava blades and whatnot. It's just not going to be working that fast as it used to be before. In episode 11 we dealt with the skyblock type mob farms. There was a lot of skyblock back in the days. People were playing modded and the modded way with the dark rooms next to their islands. And I thought, let's just use vanilla mechanics for that, try to combine it with the mods and see how much we can push it and how much we can force it. It's like with all the modded, I can probably get that mod pack installed back again and try to run it. It's a big pain in the neck with these modded worlds where they last really just as much as you play it, and then they are literally gone. So instead we are here in a regular vanilla type empty world, and what's here next to this farm, it's a different concept a little bit. That's why I thought, okay, just leave it for another episode. This concept is actually pretty cool, a little bit of standard design, but there are some interesting quirks that you have to do just to get to the output that we have over here. It's not using any redstone, it's not even using water. So if you deal with like a most hardcore skyblock where you don't even have access to water, you can still build this farm and get around 10 to 12,000 drops per hour, which is pretty sweet. So you will have all the access to all the iron, to all the witch drops as well, which is pretty swell. So I guess technically speaking, the mechanics of low-wise spawning still works just fine. So I'll give the original skyblock mob farm a pass. We'll go back to that design probably some near future, but then let's continue to the next one. In episode 12 we have improved our blaze farms thanks to the introduction of sweeping and mob cramming, which greatly trivialized all the player killed mob farms back in the days, and including this one. This one was actually now super simple, no redstone needed, just let the blazes drop into a small hole, and can use this trick with ladders to get more of them than just 24 per spot, and we can just AFK, and when we're ready just swipe them off. It works really well, there's no problem with that. But before we go to the next one, I just wanted to show you a little bit of a concept that I actually built with my son. We started to teach him how to use a mouse and keyboard, and we thought the best way to do it would be with Minecraft. So here's this little world of his that I help him play, and it's a little bit different because I think there's a big problem with the game currently. If you play on peaceful, you can't really complete the game because there's a bunch of stuff that you need from mobs from the hostile aspect. And the game on easy is actually not that easy, because we have pretty much the same spawn rates, the same mob caps, meaning that players, even if they're on easy mode, they are inundated with hostile mobs. And the game is actually pretty hard, assuming that, let's say, it's your first time with a keyboard, or you just start learning how to use a computer. So what you did over here is a custom playthrough where I limited the number of mobs in the mob cap to 10, which means that we have very few mobs around, which means that if you find a mob you need to fight, you can concentrate on him without the risk of being surrounded by mobs really quickly and dying. That's why we don't see that many mobs around us here in the Nether Fortress. And that's actually put my son at the comfort that he can actually play it without getting scared too much. However, we ended up finding this blaze spawner over here and thought, just let's build a very basic farm. And this is essentially the gear we were in trying to build it. And we had no materials, just basic pickaxes, not even enchanted whatsoever. So I kept receiving questions, do you really need to remove all this area around the blaze spawner and create this huge block of blocks next to it in the corner just to get that farm to work efficiently? The answer is no, actually you don't have to. This is a very simple concept, going 4 blocks in all directions, just making the room, letting them spawn at least 6 blocks below the actual spawner, and then I just added within the existing blocks just a little bit of skirt of single block around us, meaning that if a blaze that's inside of the farm wants to get to any block that's outside of the farm, it figures out that yes, I can do that, I can get closer if I go through the opening over here. We have this nether brick walls that actually allows us to align better the blazes, but they still want to go around it. And this is actually a very simple way to do it. No materials needed, everything what you need is at the location when you're digging out the blaze farm, and that's all what you need for an effective blaze farm these days. So a very simple concept, very simple execution. You can really do it with the first blaze spawner you find on your way. I will not be including these in the world downloads for obvious reasons, but you can just have a look. It's extremely simple. You can just replicate it, I guess, right away. Next episode, episode 13, was our Sugarcane Farm. This was the first time the flying machines using observers were actually coming out, and I thought, let's just use it for farming. This is very basic concepts, because the new engines were actually allowing to attach many blocks to them without any sacrifices in terms of like the complexity. So flying machines could be actually very simple. It's still a looker. It's still the farm that looks really well. We also discussed other ways of packing it in terms of like the 2 lanes over here. This one is a 66% technically being packed up. You can go up to 80, and it's even easier these days because you can use waterlogged stairs in the floor, so you can actually run these minecarts right through these, means that the minecart layout is not as crazy as it needed to be. But I wouldn't still do it because, first of all, you need more rails, and you are still running through blocks that technically don't have any sugarcane on it, so it'll take you longer to harvest that field anyways. In this case, we can just focus on our sugarcane crops, and these extra hedges that will block the flying machines and block the items of getting lost actually look magnificently well. And this farm, I think, is still valid, and I will still build it exactly the same way. The only small little detail that I had to fix is, in this case, we had a little item slower by passing them through soul sand. They used to slow down in soul sand even when they were pushed with water. That was a very useful mechanic. It doesn't work anymore, but it's also not a big deal. What I've done over here, I just cut the water stream with adding a block and just added a cobweb, and this works exactly the same way. Just make sure that those items slow down enough so they can group up in full stacks and just run in full stacks into the storage rather than in individual item batches. And the farm, definitely a pass. It still works flawlessly. It's just really nicely looking farm. I'll just briefly go through the episode 14, which was another Guardian farm, where we figured out, yes, we need to have specific blocks to improve their fall speed and actually not affect the spawn rates, which was just redstone blocks, observers, and TNT blocks. So this is roughly the same thing. You don't need those anymore. You can just use good old glass with this exactly the same effect. You have to reduce number of lava blades. It still makes a huge loss on the lava blades these days, so this concept needs reworking, but if you have one of these farms, I guess it still works at a pretty decent level, so I guess a soft pass here as well. In episode 15 we covered the hostile mob farms, and it's by far the most popular mob farm video on the channel. It's probably because of its simplicity and the fact that we are building just a mob farm to farm most of your needs in a very, very simple way. It's exactly the same design that we had with our passive mob farm, except we are now using observers, meaning that we don't produce any light, and the redstone is even simpler than before. In this case, the control, which is the clock, runs up top, and then we put a signal using the bot powering on the droppers down, which is fine with Java. Doesn't work on Bedrock, but in Bedrock we just need to have exactly the same sequence of observers and droppers, just reverse them and put the clock below with exactly the same effect. So technically it works the same way. We already had an episode about that on the channel as well, but wasn't part of the Fun Farm series. Again, when I updated that farm, the water also updated and started to overflow. But that's something that you get for updating from older worlds, I guess. The AFK spot was right above the farm with glass blocks. I wouldn't recommend doing this way. I'll just move a little bit to the side, making sure that there is nothing above the spawning floors at all, and you should be fine. The key design principle of this farm is that we are actually using slabs to build it. And the reason is we don't want any spiders and any other mobs start pathfinding in the farm, because if they do, they cannot stick around and it's hard to push them off. By using only slabs, the only blocks really that can cause them to pathfind are these dispensers in the middle. We only have a few of them, so the chances are for a mob to actually start pathfinding is actually really slim, meaning that the mobs will just spawn and just getting flushed down and die. Very simple concept. One thing that's important to note that because of the slabs right now and the placement of water buckets, this doesn't work anymore. It's a little bit weird. You cannot really place the water on a slab. So can you use other blocks? Yes, you can use other blocks. You can use solid blocks. Mobs may start to wonder. In this case, use glass blocks, or just use the slabs as you did before and either use ice, which is also fine, or you can also place those water blocks against some other blocks as well. So it's a little annoyance, but it's technically possible to build it this way as well. So overall verdict is this farm works just fine without any changes. You can build it in Bedrock Edition by just flipping the direction of the dispensers on the observers. And I have also other designs here in this world that just should work just great. In this case we're just going lower and lower with other variants here, but in general they work roughly the same way. Obviously now we learned that actually different biomes have different composition of mobs in them. If you, for example, build it in a desert biome, we don't get that many zombies, meaning that we can get more of the useful mobs to spawn in the farm, which I guess is that's what you want. So if you want to do it, yes, you can build it in a desert biome for your benefit. But before we wrap up with this design, let's quickly go to the creative version of this world and see in detail some of the other concepts that I was showing. One thing that is broken is the use of walls to prevent spiders from spawning. At some point they fixed the hitboxes of walls to actually properly reflect what they look like, meaning that actually we can get now spiders spawning with this layout of blocks. However, this can be very easily remedied, and I already showed that before. You can actually use regular glass blocks in place of the wall blocks here going right through the farm with exactly the same effect. So we already had a solution in this same episode show what to do if this doesn't work. Just use glass blocks and you should be just fine. Oh, and there's still this one, the creeper cat farm. It is a very efficient concept that I just showed. If built properly, due to the number of cats required, it can actually create quite extensive lag compared to any detection based system. When I was designing this one, there weren't any of these types really on the internet using cat mechanics, and now it's actually quite a number of popular tutorials of this concept here, but I haven't seen any of them actually that use properly the pathfinding mechanics of creepers to get them down quicker. Now, the scale range of cats has changed for worse actually, and still I haven't solved some of the pathfinding issues that I had at the beginning that happened at the edges of the farm. I still need to investigate that because they were actually crippling the rates quite a bit. Because with this kind of design, if you have really not that many ticks for the mobs to live, if you have a bunch of mobs that just stay around at the edges doing absolutely nothing, they were actually reducing the rates quite a bit. That farm in that previous form was producing about 50,000 gunpowder per hour, so 100,000 creepers, which is pretty nice for a pistonless overworld creeper farm. But it was already ticking at 50 milliseconds per tick, so it wasn't really that powerful of a concept and not really viable. However, as you can see in 1.16, it actually works quite well. It's actually not that very laggy and creepers are actually running very well from the cat. So we'll definitely go back to that concept really soon. And the rates are actually pretty good for the lag it causes. Okay guys, since I've been waffling for quite a bit, took quite some time to go through the half of the fun farms, which is fine by me, so we won't be stressing, we'll finish next time. And this was the tougher part, because we looked into really old designs, and as a result, because we can see all of them work. Some of them work a little better, some of them work a little worse, but definitely they are not broken, which I think was a success. I hope you enjoyed it, learned something new how to debug and fix older designs, and if you did, don't forget to leave me a like, subscribe if you are new for more such content in the future. Next time we have to go through the rest of the Fun Farm series. Might be a little faster to do that since we'll be dealing with newer designs, but often the scale of them increased quite a bit as well, so we'll see on that. But I guess that's it for today, so see you in the next one, bye bye!